Hello, welcome to Dr. Joe's Biology Curriculum. I hope you can enjoy our journey now as we explore the version 9 of the Australian curriculum. Our goals today is to describe the biology content of the national curriculum, understand any grand unifying theories, and enjoy ourselves in the process. But first, here's someone I'd like you to meet. This is my pet bird, Pippi, a Quaker parrot. When you look at animals and pets and things, do you ever get questions going like, why the curved beak? Why the feathers? Why is he green? Why does he have two thumbs? And why do birds like to poop wherever they like? Animals are really interesting. All of life is. And I hope today gets you asking some questions of your own. Jot them down if you can. A few points. Some of the key terms we want to discuss, things like photosynthesis, which is the process where green plants use sunlight, water and carbon dioxide to produce food and oxygen as a byproduct. The food webs, life cycles, adaptation, and cells, the basic unit of life. Take some time to get to know these phrases, and I hope you get to know them better as we discuss today. A quick disclaimer, I am not a biology specialist, I'm just a passionate science teacher educator. There are, of course, more layers of learning and understanding in all the topics I'm very briefly touching on today. Just what is life and the biology curriculum and how can we teach it? So you can find the curriculum here, but let's start out with the early childhood curriculum. Observe external features of plants and animals. So that's an easy one. Snakes have scales, mammals have hair, etc., etc. Leaves and plants. It's about noting and labeling things that you see in nature. This is for the little 4-year-olds. Then we have the year 1, identifying the basic needs of plants and animals. So what things need to stay alive. It's a fun play. We get to talk about nests and burrows and that sort of stuff. Then we skip grade 2 due to the crowded curriculum and go straight to year 3, where we begin to talk about the characteristics of living and non-living things and examine the difference between the life cycles of plants and animals. So it's a really good time to get in the silkworms and such, so kids can experience living things. Moving on to year 4, we begin to explain the roles and interactions of consumers, producers and decomposers. So what we're talking about is habitat and food chains. Grade 5, we focus back in on structure and survival. So why do we have things like wings, teeth, eyes? How do the body parts of various life forms help them to survive in their environment? Why eucalyptus leaves tend to point downwards and all sorts of things. And year 6, physical conditions of habitat, analyse growth and survival of living things. So we're really talking about structures and conservation. At the end of primary school, how can we influence a life or a species according to what sort of environment it has? So it's a really good unit on helping us to care for our world. Skipping ahead to high school, year 7 is when we talk about classifying life, the dichotomous keys that we use to label various species in the world. Focus on food webs. Year 8, we really get into cells and organs, so some really great science and research there. Systems and regulation is year 9, that's reproduction, particularly challenging year to teach for some people. And DNA, year 10 is where we really focus on DNA and for the first time use the word evolution in the biology curriculum. So the key ideas are in the biology curriculum: patterns, order and organisation. Organs have uses. Another key idea is form and function. Ants have feet. Humans have hands, and we got the power grip and the precision grip in order to help us in the environment. Stability and change, homeostasis, the tendency for things to want to stay at the level they're at, the amount of temperature in our body, the amount of salt in our blood, tries the body's really trying to keep the things in balance, and that's what homeostasis is about. Scale and measurement. This is a really interesting one for biology because the scale once again goes from the incredibly small, life so small you can't even see it, at times even in a microscope. And then you get the enormous scales of time, the 4.5 billion years of the history of life on Earth and such. So it's a really broad topic there. Focusing on matter and energy, life requires energy, and you'd be surprised how often life and energy is talked about in the biology curriculum. Oh, and systems. So various systems that work together, such as food webs. So all of these are in the curriculum and cut across all year levels and help you know what sort of ideas you want to teach in biology. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be an area of the curriculum which is really relatable. We're talking about living things, and to the best of my knowledge, all your students are alive. So this stuff matters to them. So as we look closer at the national curriculum, we see the core concepts being developed. So a diverse range of living things have evolved, biological systems are independent and interact, and the form and features of living. So there's three main points. But I offer you this challenge. A lot of schools don't want you to use the word evolution, don't want to teach the word evolution. But as you can see, it's in there, in the curriculum. Diverse range of living things have evolved on life. Why is it number one? Because all the biology curriculum is based on the theory of evolution. It's not something we work up to. It's from the very beginning, as we're talking about form and function. But it is a hot topic in schools, isn't it? And I do respect this. However, I think it's important to be aware of the theory of evolution when you're teaching the biology curriculum, whether or not your school allows you or you personally choose to use it. Understand the point. You cannot disagree with a theory you do not fully understand. So I want you to understand the theory of evolution. I feel I have to teach you a little bit about the theory of evolution if we're going to talk the biology curriculum. It is a really important theory. Often in science, it doesn't matter if it's right. What matters is that the theory works. So we're obliged to use it even if we don't like it. And there are lots of theories in science which could meet that criteria, but if they work, we use them. Great minds differ. And science isn't finished. We're still learning things. Most scientists I know wouldn't say they know everything there is to know about their field, especially the life sciences. There are things yet to learn. So keep in mind, science has an open mind. Science isn't finished. It's always learning new things. So I hope you can be a bit open-minded about the theory of evolution. I want to help explain it a bit today and see what you think of it. I'd love to hear. Tell me in the comments. So let's see, how did it all get started? Charles Darwin, as you know, originated the theory. And to put it very simply, he noted that animals have more kids than they need to survive. Generally, but not always. The kids are all different but inherit characteristics from both parents. And finally, those kids who are more fit to survive grow on to have kids of their own. That's the basic idea of the theory. And given enormous amounts of time, his theory was it could create massive changes in a species, perhaps even all the variety of life that we see on Earth today. It's a theory that takes a bit of stretches your brain. You really have to think about it. Has life been here for millions of years? Did it look differently? Like 1,000 years ago, yeah, the plants were in different places, but they were the same plants. We're talking millions and thousands of millions of years. But just like all sciences, you have to use your creativity and your imagination in order to explore scientific theories. This is one mnemonic that has been developed, the VIST overview: variation, inheritance, selection, and time. Just a way to explore the main points of evolutionary theory. Now, a brief history of the theory. This is worth knowing. Theories don't come out of nowhere. Someone, a living person, has to come up with the theory and then tell other people. And science is nothing if not a grand collection of theories. Remember, theory doesn't mean guess. It means explanation that we can test. So this is the explanation of how life got on Earth, which is an idea that we have tested a lot. So Darwin went on his voyage in about 1931 on the Beagle to Catalan life, like a lot of biologists of his time, trying to wonder where did all this life come from. He stopped at the Galapagos Islands, and there are some of the finch drawings that I believe he did, showing how different finches had different beaks and were therefore more readily able to access different food sources, different sized seeds and such. And he wondered if they'd all come from a common ancestor historically. What's particularly interesting is he sat on his idea for 20 years because he knew it would be controversial, until a fellow scientist by the name of Wallace sent him exactly the same theory, thinking and asking, what do you think of this theory? And Darwin, instead of replying, published his theory. Wallace was a bit upset by that. He wasn't sure that Darwin had just robbed him, but it seems they made peace over that. And Darwin's like, no, I thought of this ages ago. I just didn't have the courage to put it down. I don't know, it's an interesting part of the story. And a bit about Darwin and Wallace, controversial from the start. And here is a picture of Charles Darwin with one of his kids, even knowing what he didn't know about life, inheritance and biology. He did marry his first cousin, and I believe was worried every time they got sick. He was worried that he'd inbred and made a mistake, but they still became great people in their own right. So Darwin, just an interesting character, and the whole story about evolution, really interesting. There is a possibly apocryphal story of the Bishop of Birmingham's wife or relative who said, "My dear, let us hope it is not true, but if it is true, let us hope it will not become generally known." Now, of course, you can take the other view of the theory of evolution, that it's completely right and everyone should know it, and I'm going to let you make the judgment for yourself on that. I do think that if you're going to teach the biology curriculum, you have to understand the principles at the very least. Even if you openly do not espouse a theory, understand what it's saying, where it comes from, and why it works, and why biological scientists are relying so much on the theory of evolution to explain what they do. So, why use evolutionary theory? Well, for one, it meets the gold standard. It is experiential. It has a lot of hard evidence to support it. A lot of other competing theories struggle to find compelling evidence. Silver standard adherence. It fits with what we currently know about atoms, the age of the Earth. Evolutionary theory requires the Earth to be billions of years old, and currently that's our understanding. The Earth is 4.5, several billion years old. Some other theories don't fit well with the rest of science, but that's okay. You're allowed to not know. Science is a journey that we haven't finished. And lastly, the bronze standard consensus. It is the governing theory in the field of biology. To ignore it is at best dangerous and at worst reprehensible. It ties together life-saving medicine and methods of developing new drugs through using evolutionary processes, sped up millions of times. Please, at least understand this is a theory you can't ignore and shouldn't, because it's helpful. Besides, it works. Whether or not it's true is a question science can inform but not answer. You can work with it even if you don't like it. You cannot disagree effectively with a theory you do not understand. Theory doesn't mean guess, it means explanation. And one choice you also have is to keep your bodies of knowledge separate and say, which is fair to say in science, we don't know how these two theories of where the world comes from fit together. And that's okay. We're still learning. We've still much more to discover. So there's some thoughts I hope can help. Please keep in mind, theories grow. The theory that Darwin pronounced has changed. It's now very complex. Scientists argue in details of how it happened, not whether or not it happens. And we didn't, here's a key point, we didn't evolve from apes, but from a common ancestor. Another problem we have with the theory of evolution is it relies very heavily on things like fossils, the prints of records of life that are buried in the ground. And has been noted not 1 in every million life forms ever becomes a fossil, and we've yet to find 1 in every million fossils that are available. So there are clear gaps in the record, but scientists are working very hard to make sense of it. When I was a kid growing up, humans had been in Australia for 40,000 years, and now I'm really happy to say they've been in Australia for 60,000 years. Science is learning and growing all the time. So keep an open mind. Now let's focus on what it means just to teach the biology curriculum. The early years learning framework can be an awful lot of fun for the very, very young. We're focusing on the external features of animals and plants, provide experience, support curious and hands-on learning. Yeah, this is a really good point. I mean, if you're going to teach biology in grade 4, go outside. Sorry to the 4-year-olds, you've got to go outside. Pick up leaves, look at twigs, have some animals in the classroom if you can do so safely. Biology curriculum is one of the aspects of the curriculum which, above all others, doesn't need to be in a book. It's as soon as you look out the window. So please, some of the skills that the little 4-year-olds can work on are observation and classification. And it's fun to let them create their own classification schemes. You know, big leaves and small leaves and brown leaves and green leaves. And after they've done some classification, then you give them some scientific ideas of how scientists tend to classify things in order to grow their thinking constructively, as opposed to just transmitting something directly to them, which they may have very little buy-in, very little care about. So there are so many fun things. Another thing is you can often let your class entomologist do their thing. I'm not promising you this, but usually in every class, or at least in every year level, there's some kid who picks up bugs. And done appropriately and safely, some of them are really very excellent little entomologists. They've really got some great things to share. I had a kid once bring in a whole praying mantis, tiny baby praying mantis. Boy, those things are fast. So yeah, lots of fun things you can do. I know one teacher who would bring in a bucket of worms, dump them on the tables with adequate preparation, and just let the kids poke and explore and ask questions. It's a very hands-on aspect of the curriculum. And of course, you've got Indigenous and various other cultural stories. Things like Tiddalik that talk about animals and their relationship to us and the environment. It's a wonderful time to teach biology. And one of my favourite things is just going outside. Here's a picture of some of the animals that you can see at CQU Bundaberg. These are pictures I take just walking around in the morning. That's a frill-necked lizard sunning itself on an early morning tree. You don't want to get too close to those. Boy, they can be fierce and justifiably chase you off. So safe distance. Here's another safe distance animal. Yep, just on campus, what we have here is a little mob of kangaroos. And you see this big guy here? He's the boomer. And you do not want to pick a fight with that boy. He will rip you open very quickly. And when they stand up on their hind legs and lose their tail, they're almost a metre taller than any other guy in the room. The pectoral muscles are incredibly dense because they kick each other in the chest until the other person surrenders. And yeah, he's got claws that the skin on the kangaroo's chest is extra thick because they can claw each other and rip you and me open very quickly. So we give space, give a bit of space to the guys, give nature the space it needs to be safe. And here we have a very cute little video of some of the noisy miners that are on campus.
Oh, that's as cute as can be. Can you see those little guys?
Now they're lots
Mum
of
or
fun
Dad, here they
because
come.
I'll tell you,
you
when a snake is around, all the noisy miners go off Twice now at home, and noisy miners have let me know there was a giant brown snake on the property.
Shh, gotta hide. That's your job to stay safe.
And I found these guys because the parents were going off because
Feed the babies.
there was a goanna climbing up the tree. So yeah, noisy miners, they can be helpful too. Beautiful, beautiful little things. And you know what? If you're nice to them, animals can recognise your face. I'm not saying you should make friends with all of them, but noisy miners, if you don't throw stones at them, they don't set off an alarm when you're walking past. Australian animals, give them respect. So, year one. Now we're focusing on the basic needs of plants and animals. And that's so much fun. Bring in a pet. Grow a garden. You know, have a little place where things are growing at your school. So we're trying to help kids know about basic needs. And one thing I really don't want to see is when you get 3 plants, you put one in the cupboard, and then everyone's like, wow, it died. Gee, we didn't know that would happen. Can we be a bit more subtle than that? Like maybe put it in a dark corner, or, you know, just give the kids some credit for what they know. Let them describe the conditions to test. You'd be surprised. 5-year-olds can learn a lot of things, like they observe their parent putting sugar in the flower water to make the flowers last longer. And you're like, if we put sugar in our water, will the plants grow better? Just little experiments like that. Just make sure you don't have, 3 plants. Everybody does, scientific experiments with just 3 things, and get 10 or 30 or as many as you can. You've got to have multiple trials in order to be accurate in science. So that's a detour. Back to where we were. Check out the elaborations online. They're super helpful too. Fun activity could be to take a photo audit of the living things that are in your school or your home, or you're on a trip to the zoo, which helps to identify what shelter the animals like to use. The fascinating thing about home, as much as they sort of resemble caves, at least in some ways, the argument could be made, but we like to think we've chased off all the animals, but we haven't. These homes are perfect venues for things like cockroaches, and we tend to enjoy having daddy long-legged spiders around, The environment where we let things live. What do they need? They're clearly getting their needs met, or they'd leave. That's a fun thing about the curriculum here. Let the kids be the experts. Let them teach you and the class what they've experienced with the animals that they have around at their home. And of course you could do things like games, match the water source or shelter to the animal, etc. Help kids learn about things, and a really good area for kids to learn from each other. So here's where some animals live near where I am. Horses in a field, and chickens there too. And a nest that just fell out of a tree after it had been used. Something to share and show off to the class and have kids talk about. See if they can make their own nest. And if they realise the softer things are in the middle and the harder, stabby things are on the outside. Nests are amazing things. Parents have to clean the nest all the time. And what life forms do you think could live in this environment if we dig through a little bit? We've got the mosses, the trees and plants and shrubs. They're all tiny, tiny animals hiding in the water. There's life all around us. So now we get to year 3, where we're focusing on living and non-living and life cycles. Why? So kids don't think rocks and hair are alive. It's one of the first abstract categories that we impose upon an early scientist's thinking in terms of biology. All living things move, breathe, respond to stimuli, grow, reproduce, excrete, and have similar basic needs like nourishment. So is that what makes something alive? Have you contemplated what makes things alive and why this is a valuable thing for kids to know? Point here is breathing is too limited. All living things respire, which means to convert food to energy. Some use oxygen, some do not, such as anaerobic respiration, which humans are capable of in certain situations. So you can use breathe, but it's not technical enough, which leads you to a whole discussion. Do all living things need the sun? Oh, that's a discussion for later as well. Another point is trees use oxygen like we do. So you know how we say we breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide, and trees do the opposite? It's not that simple. Trees use oxygen, they respire just like we do, but when the sun is shining on them, they're making more oxygen than they need. Along that point, we don't use up all the oxygen we breathe in either. We actually breathe out more oxygen than carbon dioxide in the normal breath. So it's such amazing things. You got to keep asking questions, and the knowledge is always getting deeper and more substantive and more fascinating all the time. And non-living things don't do that. So here are some different ways to represent the qualities of living things that your kids can discuss. Maybe get them to categorize living from non-living and try to create this list for themselves before showing them what the official science list is. Let them discuss if they think it's right or how this idea helps them in their thinking. Living things and non-living things, various ways to categorize. Of course, it doesn't need to be this simple either. But what about things that were once alive, like twigs and sticks? They're not alive, but they used to grow. What about things like, trees are circular organisms. The bark inside and out is actually dead and can rot away while the tree lives. Trees are cylindrical organisms. Right? The living part is just this ring like this. Everything on the inside and the outside is dead. Same with the outer layer of your skin. The outer layer of our skin cells are not alive anymore. Thankfully, they protect the living cells underneath, get rid of all the dead cells, and you're almost red in colour. It's not healthy. Sunburn's very dangerous. So, just an interesting thing about life and non-life. But what about synthetic materials? Used to be called man-made. I prefer the version synthetic. Plastic chairs are made out of oil, which might have been made out of biological materials that were around during the dino time. Now, this is another misconception. Oil is, well, if you say oil's made out of dinosaurs, you're stretching it a bit. It's made out of things that might have been around during the dinosaur time. Usually a lot more things like plants and ferns would be the living things that become crude oil. But yeah, is plastic a material that was once alive? Oil certainly was once alive, but though we've changed it so much, is it no longer a once alive material, but more accurately to think of it as a synthetic and artificial material? Those are conversations you can have with your kids if they're willing to dig a little bit deeper. Just remember, don't perform an info dump when you can help them create this knowledge for themselves like scientists. They may come up with these categories and have different names for them themselves. That's a great way to teach kids. It validates their questioning, their exploring, and everything that's valuable and fun about doing science. So here's a few categories I prepared earlier. From top left, synthetic, alive, never alive, and once alive, including Pippin, who's sitting there wondering why these strange objects have been put out on the table with him. He did not know what they were for. It's like, why am I in another experiment? Moving on. Yes, year 4, 9-year-olds. We're finally talking food chains, which is consumers, which are the animals that eat other animals. The producers, which are things like grass and trees, they produce their food from the sun and such. And the decomposers, which turn dead things into material that new living things can create. We're talking funguses and mosses and stuff. And consumers are also the animals that eat the plants and where they belong in the habitat, and how different animals have incredibly different relationships in different environments. So here they are, the heterotroph, autotroph, and decomposers. Can animals perform 2 roles? Indeed, ants, perhaps. Venus flytraps are both consumers and producers. Interesting conversations to be had. But when you're designing a food chain, you're talking about these different classifications. And yes, one of the subtle points about year 4 is it does more overtly contain discussions around death, which you'll want to handle sensitively with your young people. It's it can be done well and it can be done poorly, so have some respect that this is one of the topics that will come up as we're talking about food chains and life. So if you dare to use Northern European English food web instead of an Australian one, I will reach the internet and pinch you. Unless, of course, you happen to be in those countries. Use the food web of the local environment. Get kids to go out of the classroom, take photos of the living things around there, including the producers, consumers and decomposers, and build your food web from their photos. You're using technology, you're engaging their curiosity. You're not cutting pictures out of a book and sticking them when you want science to be something that, gets our hands dirty, and then we wash them because germs. So, great stuff happening in year 4. Australian food web, cut and stick. Here's some pictures. If you really can't get photos of some of these animals lying round about because they're there, you should use your local environment. If you're going to talk environment, talk schoolyard. And here's a really cool picture of 3D representation of the different connections between different animals that one class generated during COVID. Beautiful. Love that picture. Helps people see the relationships and discuss how things are connected in different ways. Here's one interesting story. The Queensland cade toad, native to Central America, brought over to kill a cane beetle, which it did, but not nearly as much as it ate everything it could. Boy, someone messed up. When I was a kid, I was told the Queensland cade toad had no natural predators, but now we've counted at least a dozen Australian animals that eat the cade toads. Nature is adapting and changing. It belongs in the food web now. Crows have learned, possibly from roadkill, to flip it over upside down and eat it from the other side. And there's some crocodiles on the top end who are from a similar environment and have some resistance to toad poison. But we have the greatest respect for the tiny little Melomere. There it is, a little mouse-like creature who has been recorded in this ABC report to eat all parts of the toad, and they love them very deliciously. This little predator of the Queensland cade toad. Of course, cats will prey on these guys, so feral cats are a serious problem. Cats, man. And here, I'd like you to meet Toadzilla. Yep, found in North Queensland. He was euthanized, kindly and painlessly and is now in a museum. But was it right to remove this guy from the food web? Or if he stayed and produced kids, I mean, toads produce thousands of offspring, tens of thousands. And they'd all have his genes that helped create these enormous sized toads. Yeah, I'm glad they got rid of him. Good call. So, year 5, we start to talk about structural features, bones, organs, etc. Why do birds have different beaks? Why are there so many different kinds of penguins? What is the role of camouflage? In other words, we're talking that animals are made up of different parts, and we want to know what those parts do to improve survival. And these are some amazing little science stories. Why was Toadzilla so big? What evolutionary pressures helped the toad babies getting bigger and bigger? Well, they could jump farther, move quicker. And apparently there was enough food for them all to eat, so it wasn't selecting for smaller toads. And bigger species tend to have an easier time finding mates because they can push others of their own species around. So everywhere you look in nature, there's this little story behind any feature of an animal whatsoever, any aspect of a plant or even of a microbe. All the structures have stories to them. It's amazing. Here's a few toys I found interesting for learning science. This is the bug sucker, where you suck up a little ant, pop it into the bottle, and then you can explore it and look at it very closely. I find they tend to run around crazy for about 10 minutes and they sort of stop and pause as if waiting to see what fate intends for them. And you can get a little look at them, and then you can get the kids to put the little ant right back where they got it, which is a purposeful message of stewardship of the world. These guys are really enjoying their bug suckers. One point is don't turn over rocks. That's where you tend to find things like redback spiders. So we got these kids to focus very much on what's just visible on the ground. Really great fun, and the whole skill of getting a bug sucker to work is quite the gross motor skill challenge, actually. Plus, so yeah, interesting stuff. Really fun science. Chasing those little ants and trying to capture one and then putting it back where you found it. Now, this is the story I use of the mallets, which is about adaptation and how different environments can change the features of an animal. So if we start with an original mallet, short legs, fluffy, big eyes, fluffy ears, one of them, a big storm comes up and moves them all around the world. And we have the rainforest mallet. So as you can see, it's still fluffy and feathery, but it's a lot more feathery to find mates in the crowded forest. Broad, small wings to navigate the jungle. And these are the ideas that kids came up with themselves. They researched how their body parts would change, what environments, what animals in that environment had. So you take the desert mallet, and we looked at animals in the desert and then changed our mallet to have features of that animal. Long legs, just like camels, to keep them off the hottest part of the ground. Small eyes to avoid sand. The eyes have changed. Well done. And the Arctic mallet, super fluffy. There's 2 eyes there, I promise you. Short, stocky and fluffy to keep warm, very white. Because when this young man researched what animals were in the Arctic, they're fluffy, padded, and chonky. And these kids did this, homeschool kids did all this research, so it's amazing. One thing to remember, and I think this is very, very important. Evolution doesn't invent, it only adapts. It changes what it has. So one of the important points with all these mallets is not to create anything new. You had to use something it already had. Adaptation, not invention, which is one of the pieces of evidence for evolution by natural selection. The human sinus systems some of the problems with drainage and such can be explained from having snout-bearing ancestors. Evolution modified existing skull structures rather than designing a new and optimal system. So many examples of this. Wisdom teeth is a good one. For the vast majority of human history, you'd lose teeth, and by the time you're 18, you'd lost several. It was handy to get another set of teeth by the time you're 18, but not anymore. We get to keep a lot of our teeth because we've learned about fluoride and how it can really help teeth to be strong. So that's an adaptation which doesn't serve a modern purpose as much. It's fascinating. The retinas in vertebrates are wired backwards. The blood, the veins and such are in front of the rods and cones, unlike some animals. Vitamin C deficiency, that's a really interesting one. They see our distant ancestors used to be able to make vitamin C, but at some point we lost the ability to make our own, but at that point it didn't seem to matter because the diet was replacing it, or we could get vitamin C just from sharing and cultural influences. And so, yeah, if we can't make our own vitamin C, I think they've isolated the gene that can create vitamin C, and so they could make it so humans could create their own vitamin C if they were eating the right things, but we don't know if that would cause some other problem, like make it harder for oxygen to get into our bloods or something. So it's just so interesting. All these stories, they'll weave together in a complex narrative with so many gaps and things we don't yet fully understand. Childbirth. This is an interesting one because in order to develop brains as big as we've got, the kids needed to come out of their mothers with big heads, and that was a real problem. So the solution our evolution came up with is pop the babies out early, like really early, before they're like a year or two too soon, before they can even walk. But because we had caring and culture and communities, it worked because we looked after our young and the pregnant, ill and infirm. And that didn't select for and so that's changed the nature of childbirth. It's difficult for humans to give birth. It really, really is. But we found a way around some of those environmental and evolutionary disadvantages. And and many more. So many examples. There's an interesting one about the human eye. For instance, the light coming in would work better if it was air-filled, but our eyes not. They're fluid-filled. Does it make them stronger? Well, there's a whole discussion to be had around that. There really is. But evolution or adaptation only goes with what works, not what's best, and certainly not what's moral or right. It only goes with what works. That makes evolution amoral. It's not right or wrong, it's just what works. And you can see that in predator versus prey interactions. This is really, really interesting stuff. For instance, predators usually have attack adaptations, claws, giant teeth, hooked beak. Whereas prey will have flight adaptations, hooves, leaping, jumping, inking, like with octopuses and such. So prey can be very fast, very, very fast too. Predators will have eyes forward to zoom in on prey, very much like humans, predator species, so we can zoom in, whereas prey will tend to have eyes on the side, like my little pippin, eyes on the side to scan around a lot, larger ears and eyes. Predators will often have camouflage to stalk and silence prey, to silently stalk prey, whereas prey often have camouflage to hide. But some prey have opted for very bright colours to warn of poison. A fascinating adaptation too. Don't eat me accidentally. Sometimes poison is designed to not kill the predator, because then they don't learn their lesson. That's why toad poison just makes creatures sick and nauseous. And they learn very quickly to keep away, as Mr. Darcy, our pet cat, has learnt. Poor little fella. His little irises were completely diluted. He was a sick cat. Moving on. Poison to immobilize and prevent escape, which is an adaptation. What did famous Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy author said? 9 of the 10 most dangerous snakes live in Australia. But it's probably more accurate to say 9 of the 9 most poisonous snakes in the world live in Australia. Why? Well, one theory is because everything's so fairly desertly and all spread out, you've got to have incredibly potent poison because you've got one chance to catch a meal potentially for the whole day. So you need a very, very high level of poison so that even a tiny bit will get you your next meal. Interesting things about poison. Whereas prey will often poison to deter, to harm, not kill. Cade Tone's in point. Now, predators are really interesting. Fewer offspring with higher survival skills. Predators invest a lot in their offspring and tend to have fewer offspring. These like tigers and such. Whereas prey species, babies, all the babies, yep. Quaker birds included, but then we get down to little mice who are very much a prey species, and their main survival technique is just have more kids. And things like cockroaches and toads, thousands and thousands of kids. Yep, that's the survival technique of prey. And another example of how humans are predators. We tend to not have a lot of kids compared to cockroaches, please. Predators will often have larger bodies for comparative speed. Prey will often have smaller bodies so they can speed up life cycle and they can accelerate quicker. So what other adaptations can you think of in general and then in specific? In general between predators and prey and in specific different animals that you might be talking about and sharing in your classroom. Here is a beautiful little prey. Every feature, every animal or plant is a feature of what works in their environment. Take little bunnies. This was Luna, my lop-eared bunny, helping with magical science shows a while ago. Even behaviours depend very much on what works in the environment. Take bunnies, for example. He had a rule: do not corner me, do not put me on slippery surfaces. It was so interesting how much this little bunny would freak out once it realised it couldn't get its claws into the surface it was on. All right? Really, really nervous. So the simple rule for that is always be able to flee at a moment's notice. It was just built in to Little Rabbit. Very large sidey eyes to see danger, large ears to pick up noise. The silent approach of various predators. Another thing that rabbits do is at night poop is food. They actually produce poop at night that they can eat. And apart from the fact that it's really hard to digest things like plants, it has a more important behavioural benefit is they don't have to go out at night. They can stay in the burrow for a little bit longer, which is a behaviour that helps protect them. And bunny tactic survival number 1 is have more bunnies. So when little Luna got sick, she didn't have much of a chance. The vet was like, no, sorry. When prey species get sick, they don't, they're not really robust. Whereas things like cats are said to have 9 lives because they're predators. It's just the interesting thing about the world. Let's look at another bird, hey? Another species. Little, tiny Quaker parrot. He's beautiful, very social, very friendly. As a matter of fact, he's clingy. He thinks he belongs on your shoulder and nowhere else. He'll sit there for hours at a time, especially when there's food. But that might have a behavioural survival point. You see, with food, Birds that eat together flock together, and birds that flock together have a greater chance of individual survival. So these sorts of behaviours tend to strengthen the community of the flock. That's why they're all the same colour, so no one stands out. He's obsessed with preening, especially when he's going to sleep. That's really funny. Just before napping, he'll fix up all his feathers and such, and none of them look out of place, and sometimes they look worse afterwards, but birds need to do that because you've got to be prepared to flee instantly, all the time, at a moment's notice. So that's why he's obsessed. Pippin is obsessed with preening. He beeps with alarm at the slightest nearby noise. Now this is annoying when he's sitting next to your ear. Yes. But hypersensitive to danger, and also if one bird spots danger and beeps, all the birds round about are better protected. And that helps the survival of the flock. And he has a short curved beak, which is very sharp. It's interesting how birds used to have teeth, but over the time since the dinosaurs were all wiped out, birds have survived more often with smaller beaks. And this is a really interesting multi-tool beak, really good. You can even eat meat and nuts and all sorts of things. Green to blend in with the locality of the trees and leaves, and two thumbs, one there and one at the back over there, just to help them hold onto branches. Birds are so fun. They say a bird, when it sits on a branch, is not afraid, not because he trusts the branch, but because he trusts his wings. So yeah, birds are great survivors. They really are. But there's one thing that is tricky. He poops wherever he wants. And really, is there a survival benefit to pooping wherever you want? Well, obviously there is, because unlike cats, birds are really very visible creatures, and so they don't mind where they poop. But being light, even being a tiny bit lighter than the bird next to you, improves your chances of survival. So a lot of birds will just poop often and as soon as they need to. Tiny little poops all the time. It just maximizes their individual survival. Yeah, can't train them to go in a kitty litter, but at least you can train them to poop on command, and that lessens the chance of them pooping on you. But yeah, if you're going to have a pet bird, they're going to poop wherever they want. So yeah, getting along with animals, getting to know them, and having respect for their behaviour, their personality, and their form and features. It's very important, and a thing to teach kids. And another part of this curriculum, if you dig a little deeper into it, especially in year 5, nature doesn't have the ability to put naughty and nice signs on things. So what it does is make the things that tend towards survival pleasurable, whereas the things that tend towards harming you painful. Cats initially chase mice just because it's fun. They love moving things. They have great perceptual constancy. If the mouse goes behind, they know it's still, they can't see it, but they know it's still there, and they really enjoy the activity. But it tends to select that just liking chasing things helps make them better hunters. Looking at the sun hurts because it's a reminder that it's potentially very damaging to you. And going back to pleasant, most foods like sugars and a little bit of salt and such, they're pleasant sensations because those chemicals are key to survival. So fear and fun, pleasure and pain, the way nature tries to help us survive. And those processes get messed up all the time, like fear. A lot of kids, especially when you're young, a loud sudden noise could indicate imminent danger, if not death. So as you get older, you tend to figure out most loud sounds, what they're for, and they're not dangerous. But when you're younger, yeah, the starter response kicks straight up to, I could be in imminent danger of death. And some people's brains don't rewire real quickly. A lot of kids with autism experience just the sound of a popping balloon, a level of fear response equivalent to when they were a 2-year-old and a balloon popped for the very first time. So, you know, the human brain is, as we say, plastic. It can change, it can learn, it can grow. But some things aren't easy for some people to learn, and we've got to have patience and help them find ways to manage their neurodivergence. But yeah, fear and fun, pleasure and pain. That's all evolution has to help us know what's going to work or what's not going to work. Now, even with that, it still has managed to create all these incredible life forms here on the Earth. We get to year 6 and we're talking habitat and survival. How do the forms and functions influence and are influenced by the environment so they can better survive? A little detour here. Why has nature repeatedly evolved crabs, snake shapes and flying critters? Have you heard of carcinization, the fact that evolution evolved crabs 6 times, or more accurate to say crab-like animals at least 6 times? I don't know why people are stuck on that, because snakes, eels, they use a snake-like body, and bird flapping bodies have evolved multiple times as well. Some body shapes survive really good for their environments, particularly crabs, semi-aquatic. They come out of the water, they can move quickly in water. They have these large, dangerous claws, which makes it easier for them to go sideways, not forwards. And they got eyes, which allow them to see almost 360 degrees around them. So sideways is not a problem. But they've got the 2 eyes, so when they find their prey, they can get a 3D image just in front of them. Oh, body forms are amazing. But another part of the grade 6 curriculum is humans' effect on the environment. And it's a really good place to talk on how can we have a positive effect on the environment and still meet all our needs as a society. This is what the grade 6 curriculum is talking. And look at some marvelous novel ideas from all around the world. This one from Malaysia, on ways we can minimize our impact on the environment and still have, you know, space for animals and insects to live, and less heat, because the transpiration of the water and liquids helps to cool down the houses within. So many good ways that we can rethink our relationship with the environment. Grade 6 is a really good point to do that. So please do, because it matters. Here's some actual science that I've used. The quadrats are fun. Biologists sometimes, when they go out to an area or field to track say the spread of an invasive weed species, will put down a meter-sized square and count how many individuals of the species are in that, and then multiply that over the whole size of the field, just to take a sample, because counting every single tree in a forest can often be impossible. Here's one that I do with the kids, and it's a really interesting one to see just how many ants there are. The average suburban block has several kilograms of ants just sitting around. Quadrats are good fun. So when you're going to tie inquiry into biology, my tip number 1 is go outside, touch dirt, and then wash your hands. But yeah, really, you've got to go outside. Don't leave biology in the book. Talk about biology in the world. Or bring the outside in. Put worms on the table. Now, use multiple trials. 3 tests per question will never do. Use hundreds if you can. So if you're doing a little bio test, don't just say, here's one in the sunshine, here's one in the shade, and here's one just in the classroom. No, here's 10 in the sunshine and 10 in the shade. You know, that's how science really works. As many trials as you can. And let kids test their variables and theories. Do not be so prescriptive, honestly. Kids have got so much creativity, and some of them have very, very legitimate questions. And it's a great chance to test them. They could say, look, this plant my mum has at home, she keeps it inside all the time and it looks really sick, and I think it needs a little bit of sunlight. And you can say, well, let's test it. Let's get a couple of little cuttings from that plant and we'll grow them up in different conditions, and we'll conclude. You find out for yourself. Kids are so creative, and they can come up with Wonderful experiments. They may even say, look, I'm just going to give my plant orange juice because I love orange juice. It's really good. And you can say, look, I don't think orange juice will work because it's too acidic. The acid levels are too high. Are there ways to test that? I mean, better for kids to see it for themselves than for them to never know because you never gave them the chance. This is what kids are crying out for in science. Real experiences in the real world that they can learn from. And yeah, sometimes that's a little dangerous. You've got to manage the dangers safely and appropriately at all times. But yeah, please make it real. Please validate the skills of your innate budding entomologists, the biologists in your classroom, the kids whose families are full-time farmers or work at the zoo. Let them share what they know. Excuse me, I need a drink. Yes, misconceptions between etymology and entomology. Moving right on. I want to know if you're doing biological sciences, if you've looked up the misconceptions that you're doing in the SCAMP textbook. Here are a few common biological misconceptions which you can discuss and explore with your young kids. Pause and take a look at this list if you'd like. Here's one. Humans have 5 senses. Oh, it reminds me of the tongue test. This is so interesting. There's so much to this. Everybody's tongue map is a little bit different, and you can get them to design their own tongue maps. Really fascinating thing. Here's a little scientist trying to explore where he tastes sweet, and it's such a rewarding experience to get a bit of lemon juice, and they're tapping their tongue. They're not tasting a thing until they hit where their personal sour taste buds are, and boom, yeah, you're tasting sour. But a little bit of sour is good because it might represent things like vitamin C. And vitamin C is necessary to keep us alive. Some would argue kids prefer sour taste because they have a higher need for vitamin C. It's fascinating how we look into all these things. This is a fun activity you can do. Now, I'd also like to share a few misconceptions about the theory of evolution. We'll come back to that and see if we can explore a bit more. It's just a theory. No, in science, it's all theories. Theory just means explanation we can test. It doesn't mean guess. So don't use the word theory. Now, you might complain that not everyone agrees with the theory of evolution. Yeah, that's the nature of science. Very rarely does all scientists agree on one theory all the time. But evolution, like many of the great theories in science, does have consensus. The majority of biologists use it in science. To ignore it is a pedagogical mistake. And I mean, even things like immunization, making new immunization work, we are basing it upon the biological principles that we learned in school. So that's the theory, that's where it comes from. The statement, if we evolved from apes, why are there still apes? Okay, the more correct version is we and apes evolved from an ape-like ancestor. Let's get that right. Some people say you're not allowed to disagree with the theory of evolution. No, I wouldn't say that's accurate either. Like any science theory, you don't have to like it, but if it works, there's good reasons to use it. But of course we disagree with the theory of evolution. There's so much to learn about it yet. So many new ideas to grow and change. So yeah, you've got to have an open mind. Next one. Just remember, when Darwin came up with the theory, he didn't have a mechanism for how parents passed on their information to their offspring. His original theory was shot down. It was proteins. He did not know about DNA. That came later. Now there's a teleological argument. Designed things have no spare parts. Evolved things will have massive redundancy, and this is observed repeatedly in nature. I'm trying to think of a really good example. Parts of our bodies that in one gender has it, the other gender doesn't need, but they still have it residually, for instance. So that's a teleological argument. Evolution tends to favour larger individuals, so most species grow over time, such as megafauna and dinosaurs. Interesting thing we repeatedly observe. Evolution adapts, it doesn't invent, it changes what it has. Evolution is amoral, there's no right or wrong, only what works. That explains a lot of the things in nature. It's there because it works, not because it's not unkind or even cruel or even a little bit messed up. Nature's very interesting like that. Evolution does not work on individuals, it works with populations. It only works if the less adapted family members die. So sometimes we misuse the word, and here's a particular example of the word evolution being misused. Individuals don't evolve, whole populations evolve. It's a really important point, because if faster humans tend to survive, they only survive if there are slower humans to feed the predators. It's just interesting things about evolution. It works on populations, not individuals. So remember, evolution has no end point. There's no pinnacle of evolution, just what works for the current environment. Evolution is designing ways to evolve faster and faster. This is something we can clearly evolve and track. Evolution is figuring out how to evolve faster. For instance, gender species tend to evolve faster than genderless species. But does that make humans the pinnacle of evolution, because we're actually able to understand DNA and evolutionary processes? But this is a philosophical discussion, the deeper side, which maybe some of your gifted and talented kids will want to think about. You can give them some of the questions you have and the things you're trying to figure out as well. I think this stuff is amazing and it's beautiful. It's just so much to learn. Remember, the two forces of evolution are not dying and two, successfully mating. 90% of the mutations are neutral. About half the remaining are negative, half may give us an advantage. So over time, the negative advantages or disadvantages get removed from the species. The neutral ones hang around and hope that they might one day turn into something useful. And the helpful ones give an individual an advantage over their peers and improve their chance of passing their DNA on to the next generation. However, the changes take place over millions of years. And remember, there are no mesoforms. Every stage has an evolutionary advantage. There's no half wings or partial beaks. It has to be the best feature or adaptation for that species at that time. So we don't have the missing link, for instance. And another misconception, Tyrannosaurus rexes did not become chickens. It's just not accurate. And it's this meme trending all over the internet, and I can't stand it. Look, they evolved from a common ancestor right back here, the basal Tyrannoraptoran. These guys got wiped out in the meteorite 66 million years ago, and nothing bigger than about a chicken survived. And these ancestors eventually evolved to form, all the bird species that we see today. Some of them, over this end, but slightly over here perhaps, moved to Australia. And one of them became a duck the size of an SUV or a small tank. Life is amazing. There's so much good stuff. This is a Cosmos video, The Eye, narrated by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Please do look that up or check it in the notes, because it answers some of the criticisms of how the eye evolved, since it is so complex. Did it have a designer or not? Science questions to be asked and science answers to be discussed and explored. Good video, and I really enjoy it. But he does make a good point here, just to settle it all once and for all. Sorry. Stop misbehaving. That's better. This is another quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson. What do you think of this? I think it's an interesting take. So in conclusion, please make the biological sciences engaging. Make it hand-on, relatable. Go outside or bring science inside. Biological science is just so much fun. Make it informative. Help kids see how form affects survival, how habitat influences form. There's so much to learn, so many useful things. And kids are really at the right age to talk about it too. And lastly, action. The biological curriculum asks us to take a stance on important issues like life and environment and health. Help the kids develop a healthy respect for their role in caring for the environment. Think globally, act locally. You don't have to solve every problem, just the ones you've been given. And, choosing to throw your rubbish out responsibly is one way that you help the whole world. So I'm thankful for the time you've taken to explore these ideas with me. I hope they make you think and discuss. I hope that your biology curriculum can be a whole lot of fun for you and everybody who shares it with you. Thank you so much for your time today.